Alright, in this video we are going to go over the double and half angle formulas. So our first example is using the double angle formulas. It says if the cosine of x is 4/5 and x is in quadrant 1, find the cosine 2x and sine 2x. So those are double angles, right? It's doubling the angle inside the trig function. And you find those over here on the right side of your trig sheet. So if I want to do the cosine of 2x, I need to know the cosine of x. I'm going to square that. And I also need to know the sine of x. I need to square that. Well, I've got the cosine of x is 4/5. However, I don't have the sine of x. So before I find these two things, I need to figure out what the sine of x is. And so there are a few ways to do that. I think the easiest way is to actually just draw a triangle. So if we're in quadrant 1, we know everything is positive. That's important. It could be a different quadrant, in which case sine could possibly be negative. But we're in quadrant 1, everything's positive. So what I'm going to think of here is just a right triangle where if this is x, the cosine of x is 4/5, which means the adjacent is 4 and the hypotenuse is 5. And if you do the Pythagorean theorem, you would find that the opposite is 3. Okay, that would be the square root of 5 squared minus 4 squared. That would give me that 3. So then the sine of x is 3/5. Okay, so I'm going to use this and this cosine is 4/5 to evaluate these double angles. So it says the cosine of 2x, and I'll pull this back up. The cosine of 2x is cosine squared x minus sine squared x. So cosine 2x is cosine squared x minus sine squared x. Well, cosine is 4/5, so I'm going to be doing 4/5 squared minus the sine is 3/5, so 3/5 squared. So that's going to give us 16 over 25 minus 9 over 25, which is going to give us 7 over 25. And then the sine of 2x, if I look at the double angle for sine, the double angle formula for sine is simply just 2 times sine x times cosine x. So this is just going to be 2 sine x cosine x, which means we're going to get 2 times 3/5 times 4/5. So I'm going to put the 2 over 1. I'm just going to multiply this all out. So 2 times 3 times 4, that's going to be 24. Over 1 times 5 times 5, that's going to be 25. So 24 over 25 would be our answer there. Okay. So you need both the value of the single angles, cosine of x and sine of x, and then you can apply those formulas, and they're fairly simple to do. Next up is the half angles. So if we look at the half angle formulas, they look a little bit more complicated. Find the exact values of the sine of 22.5 and the cosine of 22.5. So when I want to find the sine of 22.5, I want to think of 22.5 as being half of some other angle that is a unit circle angle. So 22.5 is half of 45. So if you think about using this formula here, if we plug in 45 for x, then sine of 45 over 2, that's doing the sine of 22.5. And then I can follow this formula. So the sine of 22.5 is the same as the sine of 45 over 2, which then I can follow this formula, which says plus or minus. And it's just going to be plus in this case because everything's going to be in quadrant 1 here. So we're going to do the positive square root of 1 minus cosine x over 2. So the square root of 1 minus the cosine of 45 over 2. So 45 is what's going in place of x, so it's also going over here. And then we can somewhat evaluate that, right? So the cosine of 45 is root 2 over 2. So I have the square root of 1 minus root 2 over 2 over 2. I'm going to go ahead and try to simplify this a little bit. What I would need to do on top is get a common denominator. So I'm going to make that 1 be a 2 over 2. So I'm going to end up with 2 minus root 2 over 2 all divided by 2. So then dividing by 2 would be the same as multiplying by 1/2. So, so 2 minus root 2 all over 4 is what we would end up with there. And then, you know, we could separate this out and just say the square root of 2 minus root 2 all over 2. I could take that 4 out of the square root and just make that a 2. And that's honestly about as good as we can make that look. So we'll just call that good. Cosine of 22.5, again, we're going to do the same thing, but with the cosine formula. And notice nothing really is going to change except for that middle sign is going to be plus instead of minus. But again, we're going to be plugging in 45 for x, so it's essentially going to be the same exact thing, but with a plus instead of a minus. So the cosine of 45 over 2 is going to equal the square root of 1 plus the cosine of 45 over 2, which is going to be the square root of 1 plus root 2 over 2 over 2, which again is going to lead us all the way down to the same exact thing except plus instead of minus. So it's going to lead us to the square root of 2 plus root 2 all over 2. Okay, so that is how to use the double angle and half angle formulas.